Hey everybody, welcome to the ReCoop. I'm Cooper Daniels and I'm a guy that knows a little about a lot. And today I am here with the co-founder of Algomint and Meld Ventures, Michael Cotton. How are you doing, Michael?
Good, Coop. How are you, mate?
It's good. It's good to see you again.
Mate, really good to see you as well. I don't know how
Yeah,
long, when was the last one? Was it a few months? Something like that?
it must have been a few months. That was a
Yeah, fine.
marathon. I think I made a mistake on that one because I split it up into two videos and I think that just confused people. But we really dove in last time. I how much I love talking to you. So I'm glad to be back.
Mate, likewise. And so that's why it's easy for us to get carried away.
Exactly. I like your Gowan in the background too, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, mate. So we just had a massive Algorand event here in APAC for a heap of the builders. So we had 90 Algorand builders attend, which was awesome. And as a
Hmm.
part of it, Black Books and Softfuls were releasing a collaborative NFT drop, and he did this piece live in person at
Oh,
the event.
cool.
And I managed to sort of distract people long enough to sneak it to my car and get it home, which was great.
and now they know where it went, right?
Yeah,
If they're
exactly
if
right.
they're
Yeah,
watching, if they're watching.
yeah.
So, okay, we know each other. I think most of my audience knows you by this time. But in case there's anybody out there, maybe you can give just a quick breakdown on a little bit about your background, how you got to blockchain and Algorand more specifically.
Yeah, for sure. So, Michael Cotton, I
Mhm.
actually started my first business here in Australia when I was 18, which was a gold company, just by myself originally from home. In my underwear and a singlet, trying to convince people I was a big deal and to do business with me. Now, one of the largest gold companies in the country here in Australia. As a part of that journey, we went through the stablecoin craze in 2015, 2016, where the blockchain industry was looking for potentially alternatives to things like USDT, and there was a lot of FUD around USDT. And so we
Mhm.
started digging into the idea of digitizing gold, and that was really the first step towards entering the blockchain space. From
Okay.
there, I started investing across the blockchain ecosystem, mostly in Ethereum at the time. And
Mhm.
then around 3 years ago, the guys at Apollo Capital, which is one of Australia's largest crypto funds, the CIO there, Henrik Anderson, and the COO Tim Johnson, who are both really good friends of mine, introduced me to Ashley Mild, my now current business partner, and said, "You guys might like to work together," and they were right, which was great.
Yeah.
And we both agreed that alternative layer ones were likely the future of blockchain.
Mhm.
So we went on a deep dive, met with the Avalanche team, Solana team, Nia, Polkadot, EOS, and Algorand, of course, in the mix as well.
Mhm.
And as a part of that journey, loved the Algorand tech. AJ had actually studied under Silvio Micali at MIT.
Oh, wow.
Really got along with the team. Really, really enjoyed working with them. Really liked them. Had a lot of synergies. And from there, we started working really closely with them. Took investment from Algorand into one of the first companies and started building out a lot of different pieces in the Algorand ecosystem that followed.
Right. And you're saying 3 years ago. So you've been around since pretty much the very beginning of Algorand, right? I mean, that's pretty close.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
we were pretty much, mainnet launch was when we've really committed to say, all right, Algorand was where we were going to make our home. And I think it's probably twofold. And apologies for anyone if I've talked about this before on the show, but for us it was a combination of two things. Number one, love the tech, love the team. Importantly, we thought the team had the capability to execute, which I think is a really important piece. There's
Yeah,
there's a lot about having hopes and dreams, but having the capability to deliver is can be two different things. Um,
absolutely.
and I think it's hard to argue with the team's capability. You've heard me say before, the resumes really make us all feel a bit sad when we look at our own. But um, as the other piece of it was the Great Blue Ocean at the time. We realized that there was, it was open slather. There was nothing built. There was a blank slab ready for people to actually come in and be creative with. And we felt like it was really the right time looking across the blockchain space and how much had been learned and how many pioneers had really battle tested different ideas, that there was a
Hmm.
huge opportunity to build out sort of the next generation or the next iteration of blockchain tech from scratch. What's really interesting with tokenomics as well is most businesses or most crypto businesses who have pioneered have also ended up locked in a lot of different tokenomics models that have also made it hard to sort of break the chains of of their token bonds, and that can
Right.
be really painful for them. Even Axie Infinity's been going through this with Delphi Digital, helping redo their tokenomics. So it's a great way also for new projects to take learnings from what's happened and make sure they're thinking about long-term structures, genuine long-term business models for how the token can operate. And I think that was another really great learning. So I'm rambling, but in short,
Yeah.
we were a combination of right time, right place. Could see the writing on the wall that Algorand was an incredible tech and was going to be a big part of blockchain's future, and decided this was the place for us.
Yeah. You mentioned Axie Infinity. I actually didn't look too deeply into what just happened over there, but you're the co-founder of Algomint, which is a bridge to Algorand, and I believe, if I'm correct, on Axie Infinity, yesterday or so, it was a bridge hack, wasn't it? It was another one of those bridge hacks. Yeah.
Yeah, there was. Look, it's and this is the biggest reason why I think we've been so cautious to go decentralized fast, because the risk does escalate dramatically, and the key issue is that bridges create honeypots. Because you aren't talking about, oh, there's a little bit in this pool and there's a little bit over here. There's generally very large sums of assets piled, and quite often they're untraceable assets that can be maneuvered silently and escaped with. BTC and ETH obviously being the two biggest culprits. So it's because of that we've been really cautious. We think state proofs and potentially co-chain models are probably the future, but we think it's going to be small steps, but rather than leaps in terms of making our way towards that. And we're quite conscious of it. I think it's sad not to go decentralized quickly, but things like what happened yesterday and the wormhole bridge are two great examples of, and the Poly network as well. Previously last year, so some the biggest hacks in the world have been bridge related. So I think it's something we're quite conscious of.
Yeah, I mean, it was not insignificant. That was $600 million. It's even these days when money doesn't even sound, huge numbers sound small. $600 million sounds like a lot.
Look, it's a lot.
I mean,
and look, the other thing I was going to mention is, some of these teams that have built these products that are getting exploited are, tip of the sword. These aren't random people who have, hacked something together. These are incredibly capable people who have had audits from great audit firms. So it's, it is something to be really mindful of, whether you're a bridge or also any other product in the ecosystem. It's something you've got to be really cautious of, which is why we still have the limits on the bridge, I think, as well. It's because we're sort of conscious of making sure we step this out in the right way.
Yeah, I know. I sometimes will turn into like a conspiracy theorist and wonder when these things are so big. It's just like, was that an inside job? Is there some kind of inside thing going on? I guess I will never know. So I'm not going to spend too much time thinking about it, but yeah.
Yeah, look, that's often my thought as well, Coop. Whenever I go down that path, I'm like, I'm never going to work this out.
Exactly.
I won't be the one to solve it.
I'm not solving it. And I mean, nobody really wants to, I might want to work through that on the show and nobody wants to watch that. So yes. So Algomint, let's talk about Algomint. You had a big day yesterday, a very, and I don't want to knock Algorand or the Algo ecosystem, because we all know that I'm very bullish, but it's not always that we have a successful token launch in the Algorand, ecosystem. And I feel like, and we'll see if you agree with me, but I feel like yesterday was a pretty, strong success for you guys. So for anybody watching, Algomint just launched their governance token, goMINT, right? So how did it go yesterday?
Look, and I definitely hear what you're saying, Coop. I think it was probably a slightly rougher time. I feel like, the ecosystem had been battered in the days before, with everything going on with ANIRAD and what have you. So it was certainly a harsher time, and I definitely feel like the ecosystem is probably more skeptical than ever of the space, which I think is fair as well. I think you'd be silly not to be maybe more vigilant in terms of what you're doing with your funds inside the space. I think it probably emphasizes how much additional research people need to do as well to sort of get comfortable with the product, comfortable with the team where they can. But it's, it's also sad that it does put a bit of a dampener on the space. And look, doxing teams, I do like, obviously, the Algomint team's all very open, but
Yeah.
it's also not always possible, which I feel sort of bad for some of the teams that maybe won't be able to be fully open and transparent, mostly due to, regulation
Got it. And I was going to say
concerns.
that was my question. So yeah, what are some good reasons for? I mean, we all know like Satoshi. I have a feeling that him not being doxxed has been a massive benefit to Bitcoin.
Look,
But
and it
anyways,
has
yeah,
categorically, it
yeah,
has, and I think for a lot of projects, it's the fear of what could happen on the regulation side is the real
yeah,
risk. And it is a real concern. Like, it is definitely a real problem. I think especially until projects can become genuinely decentralized, I think that's where it potentially changes quite a bit as well. But
yeah,
it's one of the problems with Algorand today, is that we don't have that decentralized governance capability yet. We don't have the ability to fully launch multi-sig smart contracts that can be deployed by 10 people with randomly scrambled signature order. Those kinds of things aren't possible yet. I think
right,
when they are, it'll help a lot, because we'll see genuine DAOs get spun up that can then sort of be more open, be more transparent, and for the community have more certainty, because the funds will be locked in a DAO council, multi-sig wallet. Like, it'll be quite different. It's just
yeah,
this phase at the moment is particularly tough, because the community want to be involved in so many things. As we're all excited to see the growth of the ecosystem. It's there aren't a lot of the measures in place that can help protect investors in these early stages. So it's just it's a hard moment in time right now for the
yeah,
ecosystem. But there's so many great tokens coming out. Like, we've
yeah,
literally we were early, but we certainly we're sort of the start of this next flow of great products coming out. So it's going to be a big. I say this all the time. It's going to be a big 6 months, but the token launch, went well. I think
yeah,
we had a rough first half hour, but we got there, and we've managed to keep the price pretty rock stable. About 3.5 million in volume across the three dexes.
yeah,
It was also great to see so much activity across three pieces of the ecosystem. It was quite symbiotic too. We were in communication with all three dexes. We had some slight listing issues, but all the teams were on hand in seconds, helping to rectify any issues, so we could get the liquidity up. And so it was also great to see the ecosystem come together.
yeah.
So that was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like the last time that we talked, there was only Tiny Man, and now you have, there's several dexes. There's more coming. I mean, I can say several because I think we have four right now, and then and then
5 if you include Algo Dex, or 6 if you
oh yeah,
include Messi.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Sorry, yeah, and I it's hard for me. I'm so like I only think about what I can do here, and so
yeah.
Algodex kind of slips because I can't really participate over there. That's okay. I mean, I'm sure they're doing a great job. I actually haven't been keeping up very well with that, but now you have all of these dexes. You have more coming. Last time we spoke, we talked about like, and you kind of touched on it just now about DAOs and they're not really being the infrastructure, but you're seeing more and more DAOs coming to Algorand. And how close do you think the ecosystem is to being able to support the kind of DAOs that you were explaining with the multi-sig wallets and all the different truly
Look,
decentralized DAOs?
Prismatic and Natalie, who you spoke to recently, thank you for the shout out. It was very kind of both of you as well.
I know.
They, I think she's the one who's really going to test what's possible yet.
Yeah, that's
I think
great.
she's doing some really interesting work on how to bring other DAOs and use Algorand as almost like a settlement layer for DAOs, which I think could be really cool as well. So I think she'll
Yeah,
be the one to really test it, because I think the other really piece for a lot of to be conscious of is some of the limitations are hard to understand until you actually really try to deliver on them. So a lot of the projects are finding this when they try to build something that they think is possible, and then they find they reach a byte limit in terms of the length of code in the contract, or things of this kind of nature that they run into, that it's like, oh, hang on, wait, we've actually got to think about this in a different way.
right.
So I think Natalie will be the first to really really test to see what can be done right now. And I think we'll get a good chunk of it. I think she'll get a good chunk of it, rolled out in the next sort of 6 to 12 months, which would be awesome.
Which is gonna be great. Okay, so let's focus in here on Algomint. I've used Algomint and I've had zero problems, and I've found. I mean, maybe I got lucky with ETH gas, but the fees are minimal. Everything happened quickly, and then you get to move it and you can take it over to AlgoFi and all this stuff. I've done it and with both Bitcoin and Ethereum. So what is the plan here for Algomint? What are we headed towards? And then I want to talk more about the goMINT token. But
so the key things on the horizon at the moment is, one, making the bridge more efficient. So reducing things like the gas fees and the sweeping fees and those kinds of things to make it more cost effective. I think that'll be a key. I think long-term bridge fees will be, borderline non-existent. I think it'll be more of a key infrastructure, low-cost piece of infrastructure. And I think it'll be what we can build out with that at our disposal, what we can build on top. So we released a light paper this week. I forget what day it is sometimes, this week. So it gives a lot more depth for anyone who hasn't read it. It's worth having a dig into. It gives a lot more depth into what our plans are. But for us, we see the long-term key vision is, how do we take what is traditionally debt equity in a bridge and actually leverage it to be more valuable and deliver value to the protocol. So for us, that's two key pieces. It's aggregation is part one, and arbitrage is part two. The reason why they're quite important is, if you look at them, if you saw, all right, aggregation and arbitrage on Algorand, useful, great. When you then start to talk about it multi-chain, it really does change the process. So one of the great examples I like to give is, if you want to trade to native ETH and you've got USDC on Solana and you come to the bridge, we actually already have ETH in the bridge. It's a part of the goETH wrapper that's also a basket, because the intention is it won't just have ETH, it'll have wrapped ETH, it'll have goETH, it'll have other ETHs that come into different ecosystems, including Algorand. The bridge doesn't just go, okay, well, we need to find you some ETH with the aggregator at the best price. The bridge goes, we just need to find one of the basket components at the best price. So it might actually go, you know what, we should just buy back one goETH from all three dexes in portions to whatever's the best price possible in these 5 different assets, to then unwrap one native ETH to this user on Solana, who then wants that delivered to their MetaMask wallet. And that's the kind of power a bridge can bring to aggregation, and then likewise for arbitrage. So that's really where we see the future of the tech, which will also mean there'll be value in arbitrage on Algorand. And if we sort of zoom back to what does that look like just on something like Algorand, is, the ability, for example, if you want to actually acquire some USDC for your algo, the goUSD basket is not just looking at USDC. It's saying, all right, well, if we can get some USDT, we can swap it in the basket for USDC. If we can buy back some goUSD, we can unwrap it into USDC. If we can get some XUSD or potentially stable or one of the other algorithmic coins, if we end up getting them into the basket, we can unwrap those and swap them into USDC. So it really just opens up the opportunity for what could be tradable to deliver the best price possible.
Oh, well, okay, there you go. And so when we discussed it earlier, and your team is unique. Like you said, you're fully doxed. You've been around forever, and you also have a past in gold, which obviously you've had to custody, or you're in charge of custody. A lot of very valuable things. This is something that is in your wheelhouse. So I feel like you're in a unique position to be trusted. I mean, from my personal perspective, but not everybody likes it. They want things to be decentralized, and you kind of laid out some of the risks of that. So right now, currently, when we use the bridge, you guys are in custody. You're in control. Algomint is making sure that all of those funds are safe, and it's managed.
Not quite all, Cooper. We essentially there's what is in essence you could call almost a decentralized piece. It's not in the sense that we could move them into custody, for example, but there's a portion that sits to allow fluidity of flow. So the idea is, what gets custody is what is not needed to be live and at risk for the bridge to function, and then we manage moving that in and out. I think the middle ground, which is potentially what we might see sometime soon, is more of a DAO multi-sig that controls the custody versus, which is kind of what it is now. It's multiple team members and key team members that have to multi-sig to remove assets,
Right.
along with sharing that custody with our custodian as well, who also has insurance over the assets, like all those kind of magical pieces. But
Right.
I think the DAO multi-sig is probably the part in between. It's not to say we won't see the decentralized piece sooner. I just think a lot of it will come down to what the risk analysis looks like. I think if we can get through 2 or 3 audits and have a diagnosis of low risk, I think we'll be happy to move to decentralized faster. I think a lot of it's just us sort of being cautious to make sure before we do take the leap that we're ready.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And then there are, like you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of exciting stuff that Algorand exclusively is building, like state proofs, and then, C3 protocols working on some cool stuff. I mean, there's some neat things coming down that'll could possibly make this much safer. And
100%. Yeah, definitely. And look, we're quite conscious of that. We've been sort of umming and ahhing about, we did some initial work on our own decentralized version, which kind of seemed semi-pointless with state proofs coming instead. We wanted to be one of the first to leverage that tech. So look, the main issue we'll have is it'll be EVM. It won't be all blockchain. So there's, we're working through what that sort of hybrid model looks like.
Right. Okay. So yesterday, we'll go back to this with the goMINT token, which I admittedly sat out just because of the reasons we talked about. I was like, man, every time I buy one of these on launch day, and of course you guys stabilized it, and I was thinking I'll get in a couple days later, it'll be down, and it's not. So well done.
I'm sorry.
Where's my deal, Michael? So I'll get some for using Algomint eventually, right? Don't the users of people that minted ETH and Bitcoin, are they going to get a little?
Exactly. 15th of April, there'll be an airdrop
15th.
for users. Yeah. So you'll have some.
Okay, there we go. It'll be timed perfectly with my birthday. All right. So, okay. Here we go. So and you mentioned it, moving to a DAO governance model. So what is goMINT? I mean, what can you kind of reveal about the utility of goMINT and some of the exciting use cases and how the value is going to grow and, all that?
Yeah, so the tokenomics of the actual platform is where we're taking all the fees that get accumulated and we'll be converting it into protocol and liquidity, which initially will be goMINT Algo. The reason we choose goMINT Algo is our future outlook is we think, most of the ASAs inside Algorand will probably be somewhat correlated to the price of Algo, in that if Algo is having a good run, most of the projects in Algorand are probably in a similar category, and vice versa. So the reason we do that is impermanent loss is a real issue on DEXs, and it helps manage that impermanent loss or minimize that impermanent loss if it was comparatively to being paired with USD, for example. So initially, that'll be the core focus of what the pairing looks like and what the liquidity will be owned in. The governance token, the goMINT governance token, really governs all of that. So the idea being that it might say we're going to stop actually using those rewards for converting to liquidity, and we're actually going to start distributing them to governors as their reward for backing the platform and doing all those kinds of bits and pieces. So initially, we will already have that program in place, but it'll be rewarded in goMINT tokens from the goMINT treasury, with the intention of once that treasury runs out, it will change to being related more to the fees that are being accumulated, and that's where the reward stream will come from. Again, this would be governance decision as well. So this would be something the governance would actually decide on when the time came as to, hey, we're voting on X, Y, Z. What do we want to actually see happen next? So that'll be sort of the core of where the utility for the token will come from. We are looking at other things such as how it can access the platform and how it could have no fees, for example, by holding a certain number of tokens. Right. It's quite interesting. Like, what's interesting with that is, and this is sort of the piece we're debating at the moment, is having no fees by having a certain number of tokens in place of getting rewards. The fees you would have not paid are probably the rewards you would have received. It's like it's a strange dynamic. So we're kind of working through what's the best way to get the best result for token holders at the moment. I'm working with CryptoCon out of Switzerland, who's helping us with some of that logic and some of that math to make sure we're actually thinking about this long term and getting the emission schedule right and the reward schedule correct to make sure we're getting that balance right.
That sounds good. And there's 1 billion goMINT, right?
1 billion goMINT, about 5 to 8 years emissions, so somewhere in that region. And the 5 to 8 years, so the shorter timeline is more relative to if there's a need for more emissions for, an ROI that's being delivered particularly strong. So a really great example is if we see an absolute boom period for Algorand and the ecosystem is exploding, we'd probably see a higher emission schedule taking advantage of, huge growth in the ecosystem. It would also could extend to much longer if, we go into a winter, for example, a crypto winter, we might tune down rewards a lot because, they aren't going to be delivering a lot of value for higher emission schedules. So a lot of it's to do with twisting that sort of knob of where should we be emitting and when should we not.
Yeah. I know it's interesting. Every time you think you were going to slip into a bear market, then now we feel like it's like, wait a second, is this
happening? Yeah,
yeah, or not? Are you tricking me? Yeah, is this a trick? That's great. So okay, what was my next question? I just sidetracked myself with that, but okay. So I'm not going to let you slide on. You made a comment earlier about like the next 6 months are going to be exciting, and you joked about it being like, well, I've said that before, right? Well, and frankly, if we spoke 6 months ago and you said the next 6 months are going to be exciting, I mean, they have been exciting. When you're in it, it feels maybe, a little less, but, at the decentralized governance launched all these DEXs, a bunch of different projects. And then we had the wonderful excitement of hacks and rug pulls too. There's excitement comes in all different forms.
I like your description there. Your positive spin. I like it.
I'm assuming when you say that the next 6 months are going to be pretty exciting, you're not talking about that kind of excitement. You're talking about there's a lot of good things coming. So what are you seeing? What are you excited about to see over the next half year in the Algorand space?
Look, less exploits would be lovely, and less rug pulls would be great.
Less rugs.
We are sort of, with a lot of projects, we are talking to them about multiple audits as well. I think, the projects need to be quite conscious that if we see a huge flow of equity, exploits are going to be fairly damaging to the ecosystem, and we all need to be really conscious of making sure we're trying to divert that. So putting that aside, all going well, we're about to see folks literally is days away from launching our, the second money market. They've done some really interesting designs in terms of their tokenomics and how it functions. Very much a long-term view on how that will work, which I think is really interesting. I think they've done a really interesting design. It'll take a little bit more getting used to because it's different to usual, but it is a really strong long-term plan in terms of how the platform can grow and be sustainable. And then, we've got everything from XPack launching, Guard launching, with Algo DeFi doing all kinds of crazy stuff. John and Owen just keep sort of, delivering on new stuff constantly.
I know. Pretty soon, Algorand's gonna have to change their name to AlgoFi. I mean, they do everything. Maybe not. Maybe. Yeah.
And look, I think we're also seeing a lot of iterations on current tech. I think Pack's a really good example. The guys there have got some pretty crazy stuff on the roadmap. And look, I think they've also had an interesting thought process. Like they're just laser focused on the most powerful DEX with the most powerful tooling. And I think we're going to see a little bit more of that kind of stuff coming through. I think XPack's a good example too. They're just absolutely laser focused on a really stable synthetic stable coin, and what mechanisms can be used to deliver on that. And then we've got liquid staking. We went from no liquid staking to what there will be 4, maybe 5 by the look of it. Which is again, and look, a probably good thing to be conscious of. We've seen this in other ecosystems. We're not alone. This often happens. The war of protocols will take place, and we will see a couple come out as winners and a couple that will sort of be okay, and maybe not everyone quite makes it. Not to get negative, but it won't be that we have 5 massive liquid staking platforms.
Well, probably not, right? And I mean, and that's the harsh reality of competition and capitalism, I guess. Really, is that there's competition, and hopefully the best one wins, and that's the best for the protocol in the end, right?
And as we're going to start to see as well, because at the moment, there is options on the DEXs, but it's certainly not I wouldn't say it's particularly diverse in terms of if you want to genuinely come and go, you know what, I'm not going to use Binance anymore. I'm going to use a DEX on Algorand. It's not really possible. You know, it's not actually really viable. Even to buy Algo in volume is not really possible yet. But I think we'll start to see that change a lot, and we're going to see, you know, a dozen more quality ASAs come to market, and all of a sudden, I think we'll see a lot more activity and a flourish of activity coming into the space, which I think will be brilliant. But also, June is a 3-year anniversary for Algorand mainnet launch, and there's some pretty strong incentives planned to really reward everyone who's been here early. And this is collectively, like, this is a, you know, an ecosystem-wide plan to deliver on some really great incentives inside Algorand, but also to then start to really bring a lot of additional users outside Algorand and, you know, swing the carrot and hopefully get them across and start utilizing the space. So I think as an ecosystem, I think our core goal is we need to have real utility. So, you know, what does that look like? I think the key piece is we need more depth in the DEXs. Because I think the foundation of using any ecosystem is being able to trade. You need to be able to trade, and you need to be able to do your everyday transactions to, you know, participate. Like, for example, for the goMINT sale, we had to buy the Algo elsewhere because we couldn't obviously buy enough to you know, to deliver on the pools. It was impossible, which was really frustrating. And it actually, I thought about staying up for 4 days and just buying, you know, 100 Algo at a time. And I was like, oh man, we can't do this. But,
that's not going to work.
Exactly. So it's, you know, it's one of those things. But we're getting there. I think in the next couple of months, we'll start to see that really change.
Well, one thing, you just got me excited about June. I like this idea that there's 3 years and the focus, and you're everything they're saying. And, you know, I've been to these conventions, and there does seem to be a glimmer in the eye of being like, oh, this is a good year. So I don't know what it is, but I'm excited about it. And what you also said is that, you know, right now, and this is about to change, there's 2 billion Algo that people own that are just sitting there not being used other than governance. So we have all these DEXs, but it's hard to have a lot of DEXs with that low of liquidity, right? I mean, there's just not enough liquidity to really, and the TVL is about to grow significantly because of things like, you know, the vault on AlgoFi, or or what Folks Finance is doing, or what Guard is doing. So there's options there, competition there, and so I think that's also going to be helpful, right?
I agree. And look, the only thing that is I think will slow us down slightly is that, you know, it is a riskier space being new tech. You know, like Avalanche, and I don't know if a lot of people don't necessarily click to this, but Avalanche had a lot of advantages being EVM and having a lot of projects that could port over really simply and actually deliver. Really trusted teams could deliver their product on Avalanche quite easily, which meant, you know, for anyone who's deploying $100 million, $50 million, you know, any sort of crazy figures, it wasn't anywhere near as tough a decision as coming into a brand new ecosystem with brand new tech written on a new language that's not had auditors that have been auditing the code for years. You know, like, all of these things are what sort of means it's going to be a slightly slower growth process than what we would all like. So I think, you know, it is that sort of 3-month window. Once we get to June and we see a really strong rewards program, I think that'll be the start of starting to really grow out that growth. And, you know, we'll have then exchanges that have been in market for 6 months and started to be really battle tested by being live. And I think that'll be our sort of time to start this sort of next run for June, July onto Christmas.
Yeah. And it seems like the audits, the auditors are starting to come over here too. There's more. I was talking to a guy, I think it's Certic. Certic just started auditing Algorand, you know, so that's also a good thing that there's more and more people that are feeling, you know, capable to audit it.
Look, completely. And look, I think it's going to be sort of a similar case with the auditors. And this is why we're sort of encouraging most of the projects to ideally focus on 3 audits, 2 smart contract, 1 penetration test kind of audit for front end. I think is key, because it's also like Algorand and the tech itself acts differently. So auditors have to think about it quite differently to other ecosystems as well. So it's good to have multiple auditors. You know, if you're using an audit firm, to really feel comfortable with their knowledge of teal and make sure that you feel really confident in what they're doing.
Right.
And I think that's going to be important, which is where I think multiple will help a lot as well. Because what we'll start to see then with multiple is, one, if Certic know you're getting an audit from another auditor, there's also this, all right, well, we don't want us to miss something and they find it,
Right.
like it starts to create some nice competition and
Yeah.
helps them all lift their game and wanting to deliver, better quality. Not that they wouldn't already, but I think it's almost a protection mechanism.
Well, yeah, that makes sense. When you do multiple, then one knows that you're getting it from another one. Then they're like, well, if they find it and we don't, then that makes us look bad. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
exactly.
So okay, so you mentioned how what you said is it Sofals? I'm sorry.
Soffles.
What Sofals? Yeah. So Sofals and the Black Book NFTs. Tell me just real quick, what are the Black Book NFTs? It's a very popular Australian graffiti artist, correct?
Yeah, so
And
Soffles is he's rated one of the biggest in the world, but he's probably Australia's biggest.
yeah.
Old school graffiti artist, lives and breathes it, does a lot of massive works, does graffiti works, like recently did works for Marvel and has done all kinds of great stuff in the graffiti world. Did all the graffiti work at our major stadium here in Australia as well, and and like most people who are they're the best of what they do. Graffiti is what he loves, but he's an incredible artist, whether it's graffiti or otherwise. You have to be. It's just graffiti is his medium of choice. So Black Books is the home of graffiti. Soffles is the first artist, but they've got plans where it won't just be him. There'll be others that'll be coming in, and I'm sure there's other stuff too, but I'm sure they haven't announced it. And there's one of the few occasions where I know I'm not meant to say it. But there's some cool stuff coming.
They look really cool. And so another NFT project I want to bring up, because I saw this, and I love talking about gold with you, but I'm not gonna put everybody through that conversation today. But I do really enjoy it. And I saw that there was an announcement, a partnership made with another NFT project, the Knights of Algorand. And there's something they're doing with gold, right? They're doing with the gold token, and how does that work? What's going on there?
Yeah, so a small team, we chatted with them recently and helped coordinate with the Meld Gold team. Essentially what they're doing is they're going to back the NFTs with a certain amount of gold. The idea is essentially to create a floor. It creates a floor price because if each NFT relates to a certain amount of gold, there's a floor to the value, which I think is a really interesting concept. And the intention is that gold will long-term ideally actually be used to yield farm to generate more gold. So it almost becomes a gold mine, if you will, which I thought was really interesting. So we're going to help them, obviously acquire that gold and get in behind the NFTs. And a small team, but really cool project. I quite like the guys, so we're giving them a hand with getting that sorted.
That's awesome. So the gold token is, we can all go buy gold token right now, and right, it's all there, and that is. What's the correlation? What is like one token?
One token's 1 gram.
Okay. So and what's a gram go for right now? What is
a gram? About $82, $82.50, something like. Sorry, that's Australian dollars too. Sorry.
Okay, so that's there's somewhere.
So $60 US or something like that.
Okay, so a gram is $6. So each token is about $60, and and I could trade for that right now on Tiny Man if I wanted to.
Not live on the DEXs yet. It will be. It will be sometime soon.
Okay. And so where is it live? Where could I buy gold?
BTC Markets, which is centralized exchange here in Australia, or via some of the gold dealers in Australia.
Gotcha.
But it will be coming to the DEXs soon.
Yeah. So is there anything going on over there with Meld Venture? I mean, I know there is, but is there anything exciting happening over there that you're looking? I mean, you've got some big things, you got Algomint, you got Meld, you're all over the place.
Yeah,
not all over the place, but
no,
I didn't mean I didn't mean. After I said it, I was like, that sounded rude. You're not all over the place. You're very grounded and centered, Michael.
Well, thank you. I try to think so. My wife probably disagrees, but I try to think so. At the moment, our biggest focus, we're almost 40 projects now in Algorand in total. So there's which is a lot. Not as big as some like Borderless, have got a huge number of projects in the portfolio. But
Yeah.
our focus at the minute is we're really trying to make sure that the projects we're working with are working together. One of the key goals of Meld Ventures originally was, not just investing, not just incubating, not just accelerating, but actually creating a vehicle to help projects find more value from each other. Collectively, the rewards programs are a really great example. Collectively, the value that can be delivered can be much stronger if you have a coordinated attack of, hey, this is how we should deploy a rewards program. You can do two things. One, you can allow projects to have lower emissions of their tokens, which means that they see less circulating supply, which is obviously really valuable. But on top of that, which we're really conscious, and the projects are really have it top of mind as well. What also helps create the right utility for the ecosystem to overall see growth. A great example is, liquidity in the dexes, trafficking volume and trafficking energy and rewards in the right places. So it becomes a really, really valuable ecosystem with a lot of utility, which in the long run will be a lot better. So at the moment, we've got a lot of focus on trying to make sure we're helping on that side, as well as obviously doing new investments and looking at additional work, but we're putting probably more energy into that, knowing that there's so many projects coming to market in this next 6-month window. That we kind of went from 6 months ago, there's nothing big on the horizon that's necessarily launching other than a couple. And now, this next 6 months, it's more like 15 projects launching or more. And it sort of realigns our thinking in terms of where we need to sort of be diverting our energy right now.
Right. So, okay. So now, now I buy some goMINT and I'm excited. I'm excited about the future. I have my goMINT. Where are there going to be some options for me to earn some yield? Like what can people that are holders of goMINT expect to get into?
So we're going to be focusing on rewarding LPs. So we're talking with all the dexes around how we can do that. So we're going to have some pretty strong rewards programs coming out. So that'll be the key place for rewards. We're going to be reasonably aggressive. We're trying to sort of find some really solid grounding between us and the dexes on how we can jointly have an aggressive approach to that. So that'll be the sort of the best place to earn yield, and you should start to see announcements from the dexes in the coming days. Once we actually start reaching some deals, you'll start to see some announcements around programs that are coming out.
Yeah. All right, Michael.
It'll be good.
It's gonna, but they'll be good. There's going to be a great incentive to do it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I mean, what am I missing here? I feel pretty good. I feel like we've covered it, but what am I missing about Algomint or, goMINT or goBTC? How are we going to, I'm going to ask this question. I'm sorry. If you had an idea, I'll let you go, but,
No, go for it. You're right.
Okay. You're the bridge, right? You're a bridge, and how do we get to interoperability quicker, or because it does seem like it's going to be an interoperable world. It's going to be a multi-chain world, and in that world, I think that the best tech is going to have an advantage, and I think that's very bullish for Algorand. So, what's our path here? Like how is Algorand going to take a step up from being a little still unknown on some level?
Look, I think state proofs across all the key blockchains would be the dream scenario. I think it would also mean Algorand could become that settlement layer for a lot of different chains. I think that would be really the dream scenario to play out, is Algorand actually delivers on this like bridging standard that any protocol like Algomint could use. Someone that wants to do cross-chain swaps like C3, like anyone who actually wants to utilize that DAO governance cross-chain like Prismatic can actually tap into this messaging, interoperability service that's the standard to actually build either side of those communication channels. I think would be the dream scenario. I think like we will still need to see at the moment, for example, when state proofs go live, depending on the block time at the time, but it's going to be around 9 or 10 minutes to actually roll up a state proof and send. And then you've got the transaction side on EVM, for example. So it's also not going to be lightning fast, but it will be, the most secure version, in theory, the most secure version we've seen to date. But the dream
Right.
would be to, one, we start to see that get a bit faster. I think that will be a part of the key. And then secondly, we see it deployed across different blockchains where, because you can imagine if it gets built out as a standard, what it means is you also don't have projects like at the moment, you got projects redoing things 10 times over, and each team is building their own version of it. And, and they're all getting audits. And if we can actually see a standard to that, I think that would be the dream scenario, and it would be incredibly useful. So I do think that's probably where we'll end up. And I think that would be amazing. And, for something like Algomint, where we fit in is this, the basketing piece is probably one of the most important things we're building, because what we'll then see with that interoperability is you're not necessarily always wrapping. You could be swapping native for native in the sense you could be swapping USDC on Ethereum for USDC on Algorand, the bridge, instead of wrapping, which we think will be fairly important for this next generation of interoperability. I think that'll be pretty key.
Yeah. And that was basically what you were talking about where Algomint's headed with some of these different things that you can do in the background and get the best deal and, provide value. And
yeah, exactly. So goUSD, for example, will contain over a dozen different USD tokens you can actually wrap into that one token. So what it then means is you can also swap between any of the tokens. And I think like the example I would use the most is probably going to be DAI to USDC on Algorand, or DAI to goUSD, or USDC on Ethereum to USDC on Algorand or goUSD. Like they're probably the most likely outcomes. I think, though, by also overlaying the aggregator in with Algomint, it means that most people are bridging to do something. And if it's a trade, you can bridge. And instead of saying, what token do I want? You just say, what outcome do I want from what I was doing here, which might have been to get Algo. And then the bridge actually looks at all the different USD tokens it has at its disposal, any other tokens it has at its disposal, and makes the best choice possible. And I think, that's where it becomes particularly interesting.
Yeah. All right. So I sort of cut you off when I asked the question. I was like, did I miss anything? And you looked like you might have had something, or you did. I don't know. But were you going to say something?
No, I've forgotten. Maybe. Mustn't have been anything that good, if I can't remember.
I'm doing great. Well, look, once again, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thank you for taking the time. I know you've got to be so busy with everything that's going on. And so thanks for taking the time to come on. And of course, you're invited to come back anytime. So as the DAO launches, or, whatever the case may be.
For sure. I really appreciate it, mate. And always love coming on the show. And thanks for everything you do inside the ecosystem as well.
All right. Thank you, Michael.